We welcome you into the show from the Shoe. I'm your host, Dan Herbener. Sitting alongside me is my co-host, Colin Hassel. It is a Friday morning. We're coming off an Ohio State victory, 28-14 over the Minnesota Golden Gophers this past Saturday night. We've had a lot of time to digest what happened in that game, there's not a whole lot coming out of it.
No, and last week we ended the show with you being optimistic about Cardale Jones, and I didn't really understand where that was coming from, and I'm going to need to hear something about that.
I've been really wrong on this podcast many times before, so I'm just going to chalk it up to being wrong again. And you know what? I own it. And that's all that matters in life, as long as you own it.
You're just going to avoid the fact that you thought they were going to change the offense for Cardale Jones, and really they didn't. And then Cardale Jones put up a stat line like he has the entire year. And it's very disappointing to see, but it was totally predictable to me. And I just want to go back because it's fascinating to me. I don't really know what you saw that made you think that Cardale Jones is going to have a good game.
Well, I just based it off of what I saw a year ago, and that was when Cardale Jones only had a week to prepare. They simplified things, and they made the offense it was catered more to his skill set. And I think they tried to do that early on in the season. And what I'm going to say is that I think it's way more Cardale Jones than it is the coordinators.
Really?
I think it's Cardale Jones' inability. He lacks confidence. He's just not the same guy he was in those 3 games. And maybe it's just the expectations getting to him or something like that, but I think he lacks confidence at this point.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of changes from last season that made me think that it wasn't going to be the successful Cardale Jones deep ball to Devin Smith again, because there is no Devin Smith, and Tom Herman left, and Tom Herman's doing great in Houston, and it's just the offense looked so different, and it didn't really surprise me. And the one question that I want to go to is, when are we going to see Cardale Jones again? Because I'm sort of assuming JT Barrett is going to play the rest of the way as starter. Maybe Cardale Jones comes in the fourth quarter of an Illinois blowout. Or maybe, that's pretty much the only scenario in which I see him playing this year.
So what's your point?
Do we not see him start for Ohio State ever again?
Probably not, because why would he not jump to the NFL draft if JT Barrett's going to be back, which more than likely JT Barrett will be back next season. And if JT Barrett carries his team to where we think they're going to go, I'll say this. We'll see Cardale Jones again if JT Barrett slips up along the way and there's another competition going into next season, which I don't see happening. I think JT Barrett is this team's quarterback the rest of the way into next season. I think Cardale Jones makes the jump to the NFL. But I don't know if he's ready for it.
No, he's not ready for it. I don't think he will. And I think that he's a 6 months late. I think he should have done it when a lot of people were clamoring for him to go after 3 games, because I think his stock was so high that it'll never be that high again. And he thought it was a good decision to come back, and maybe it is for him, like in his personal life, maybe it is for him in his own head. But football-wise, we've reached peak Cardale at the moment, and we're sort of on a steep decline.
We reached peak Cardale 7 games ago or 8 games ago, or however long ago the playoff was, and you just look. I just want to take you back. He had no expectations on him in going into that playoff. None.
Nope.
He could have failed, and people wouldn't have blamed him, because you just get thrown into this situation where you're just the guy now, and you have a week to prepare for Wisconsin or a little bit of time to prepare for Alabama, and you don't have expectations, so you just kind of let loose. Going into the season, Ohio State and Cardale Jones had a ton of expectations, and it looks like it got to him. He lost confidence, and I point to one throw, which, if you watch Cardale, you see him holding the ball, and you can tell that he's lost confidence. But the one throw I look to, it's in the third quarter. Michael Thomas runs a post corner and has his man beat. And Cardale Jones throws the ball in the back of the end zone and gets knocked away. And just to a layman who saw the play as it happened, you'd say, oh, that was just a good play by the corner. But no, Cardale Jones throws the ball late.
He has the entire year, and it's at every level, unless he's just throwing dump off to Ezekiel Elliott.
Right. You just have to be confident in your receivers to be open at a certain time. And in college, the windows are more wide open than in the NFL. And that's not helpful for Cardale, because they're just going to get tighter and tighter. And if he's not confident in himself, he's not going to be a good quarterback.
And that's why I don't see a scenario in which Cardale Jones is anything higher than just a late 5th round pick at this point. People have seen sort of what he is, and he hasn't really improved off of last year. In fact, he's definitely declined, drastically declined, really, on his on-field play. So I guess we should get away from the quarterback debate now. And
because it's JT the rest of the way.
It's JT the rest of the way.
And hopefully he has a good showing against Illinois and looks good going into the Michigan State and Michigan games. I mean, there's no way Cardale Jones I don't think we see him again this year, barring injury.
No, I other than at the fourth quarter of this blowout.
Right. But looking on the other side of the ball, gosh, we don't talk about the defense enough. We haven't talked about the defense enough on this podcast.
I always want to, but we get caught up in other topics.
Well, the offense is more interesting. It's easier to talk about something that's been inconsistent and been an area where Ohio State needs to improve. Looking on the defensive end, I think it started when Ohio State hit the postseason a year ago. 59-0 against Wisconsin, shut down Melvin Gordon. Then against Alabama, once they got their traction, it was 21-6 Alabama in that game. The defense stepped up, made plays, and then against Oregon, they played out of their minds, and they've been doing it since then. And it's just been so consistent. And I just look at the physicality of this defense. If you watch them, they're hitting people now, and it's showing, especially on the defensive line and the linebacker.
I mean, yeah, that's true, and a lot of it is because they have a lot more experience, they're a lot bigger, they're a lot faster, and they're a lot more talented. And there's a lot of guys who are headed to the NFL because really, I've said it since the beginning, and I'm going to reiterate, this is the best defense in college football, bar none. They really haven't played a good offense. They like that would be a great matchup, and I think that's a possibility that we'll see in the college football playoff. But at the moment, Ohio State's ultra talented at literally every single position. The one thing that they were missing a little bit lately is that defensive tackle spot where Tommy Shutt was having a very good year under the radar because when you're beside Joey Bosa and Adolphus Washington, you're going to be under the radar. But he was having a great year, and then he went out for a couple games, and run defense suffered a little bit. And now he's back, and Ohio State's going to roll. And I'm going to be really interested to see in 2 weeks what they do against Michigan State and 3 weeks what they do against Michigan. This is their first 2 games against actual good offenses.
Ohio State gave up 33 yards on 26 carries this past game against Minnesota, a team that wants to run the football.
Ridiculous.
They gave up some passing yards, but it was late in the game. The defense kind of laid off, and Mitch Leitner did make some plays, and he's not a bad quarterback, not by any stretch. But like you said, this defense is just so talented, and they've been so consistent.
It's ridiculous.
And it was the most overlooked component of this team coming into the season because the offense looked so great during the playoff. But I think you just look at the defense, and it was super consistent throughout the postseason a year ago, and it's just been great this season. So I would be confident that Ohio State's defense can carry them in situations where the offense might not be moving the ball as well, and that's something that has not been a focal point of this team since Urban Meyer got here, and now it is.
All right, and so we're pretty much about to move on. So we learned nothing from that game. Am I correct? The defense is still amazing.
Defense is great. The offense just doesn't look the same with Cardale Jones. Expect to see a different team take the field in Champaign coming up this Saturday at noon.
Yeah, I would assume that.
JT Barrett makes the offense look so much more different, and that's just the way that it's going to be for the rest of the season, and that's a good thing for Ohio State. Moving on to the playoff rankings, Ohio State coming in at third in the most recent release. They're sitting at 9-0. Clemson and Alabama ahead of them, 1-2 respectively, followed by Notre Dame. Those are the 4 teams that are in, so to speak, right now. But do you have any problems with Ohio State sitting at that spot?
With Ohio State's ranking, not at all.
What do you have a problem with?
If any,
do you have a problem with anything?
With anything on the list?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that I'll have slight problems, but they're just slight problems. Right now, I think the committee's doing a fairly decent job. I do think, 4 through 8 or so, when I'm talking about Notre Dame, Iowa, Baylor, Stanford, and Oklahoma State, it's really those teams are gonna play each other out, and someone's gonna lose, and one of those may remain undefeated, and they'll get in, and that's just what's gonna happen. There's gonna be a lot of debate about which of those teams should be in the playoff right now, but it ultimately doesn't matter, and that's the same with Ohio State. It's gonna figure itself out, and I'm not really gonna argue too much about the Notre Dame being at number 4 ahead of Baylor and Stanford and Oklahoma State.
So let me ask you this. Are we going to have this same conversation every single week until the end of the season? So what's the point in having the conversation? We just wanted to update you, I guess, on Ohio State and that we don't really care and nothing changed about our feelings about this playoff. It's going to work itself out because it is.
If you're looking at it from a purely Ohio State perspective,
3's fine. You win out, you're in.
If you win out, you're in, and you're likely 1 or 2. Depending if Clemson loses, then you might be 1. And I think that they'll jump Alabama if Ohio State wins out, which is they beat apparently the number 5 team and the number, I think it's 13 and 14 teams.
This poll was just another good example that this is just a snapshot of where we are, seeing as Baylor, Oklahoma State, TCU sitting. Yeah, I am, because it is. And it was last year, and people complained about TCU dropping from 3 to 6. Well, in the previous poll, they were 3, but then as the resumes changed, they dropped down to 6. It just works out that way. And that's a good way of describing it in my mind anyways. Am I wrong?
No, I totally agree with it. But if you're gonna take that shot,
I'm going to say snapshot every week.
Your
I'm going to
snapshot.
make a snapshot.
Yeah.
Yep, we're going to say
Drop
it
that
every
4
single
times a
week.
podcast.
All right. So, anyways, Ohio State's sitting at 3. Nothing really changing. Iowa
We
sitting
learned
at 5,
nothing
though.
from that as well.
Could be a good win for Ohio State.
Yes.
Iowa sitting at 5. They might be in. They might be in by the time we get to the Big Ten championship game.
It'd be a great game.
But anyways, moving on to Illinois. That game will be played in Champaign, Illinois this Saturday. The battle for the Illbuck, a wooden turtle, which I have no idea why it's a wooden turtle. The Illini and the Buckeyes play for a turtle. I don't really get it, but Illinois comes in this game at 5-4. In 2015, they're sitting on, it just seems like they've beaten teams that they're supposed to beat: Kent State, Western Illinois, Middle Tennessee State, Nebraska, Purdue, and lost to teams that they should probably lose to and teams that are in the rankings right now. So they have played some good teams, but they haven't really shown any impressive wins at this point.
They're playing Illinois football. They're 5-4. They're beating the non-conference teams that are non-Power 5 teams, and they're going to lose to everyone in the Big Ten. And maybe they'll beat 1 or 2 along the way. That's just how it's going to go. And
it's a team that fired its coach before the season, though, and that normally doesn't result in a 5-win season. I think they've done a pretty good job of righting the ship. Bill Colbert is the guy who has taken over as the interim head coach. He had some jobs at other places, Missouri, Rutgers, Stanford, where he was an offensive coordinator and a quarterback's coach, and I think he's done a good job at righting the ship. And this team's one win away from bowl eligibility. I don't think they get it this week, but they are.
No, I think they'll make it. I actually going to retract that statement because I think that they do have a difficult schedule, which is going to hurt them. But this is not the week that they're going to win. They're not a very good team. Ohio State's a great team. They're going to have J.T. Barrett back. And I think Ohio State's going to roll something along the lines of 49-7.
49-7. That's about right, I'd say. This team has good, talented running backs, but I think against Ohio State's defense, they could just neutralize any offensive weapon that Illinois could have. You just go down the list of Ohio State's schedule, and it's like there aren't that many weapons that this defense has really had to play. So I guess you could make the point that they're unproven, so to speak, but they've looked really, really good.
I think it's a good enough
this week.
I think it's a good enough point to make, but the thing that Illinois has to beat them with, they have to beat them with some one guy who just goes off. They're going to have to control the ball. They're going to have to control the turnovers. That's just not going to happen against Ohio State, who can run out with J.T. Barrett and Ezekiel Elliott running the ball. When I look at the chances, if FPI was doing their percentage chances, the Ohio State would be 99.9% chance of winning this game. And now Ohio State's going to lose this because we've been so wrong in all our predictions this year, but I'm pretty confident.
Listen, we've never predicted a loss. Just so you know, we've never predicted a loss and been wrong about it. We've been wrong about some scores. I was pretty wrong a week ago, but we've never predicted a loss. Ohio State's 9-0. I don't see that changing this week. J.T. Barrett taking over for the offense just means that things are going to look more controlled. He's going to be more efficient, getting the ball to his playmakers, and I think this offense just takes over this football game. You look at all the losses that Illinois has had, they've either given up a big game on the ground, like to Iowa and UNC, or a big game through the air against Wisconsin and Penn State, two teams that are not known for throwing the ball particularly well. I think Ohio State breaks out in one of those two categories, and I think they win big. 52-14. They take the wooden turtle home.
14 points. That's a lot to give up by this defense.
Late touchdown. 2 late touchdowns, I'll say, for Illinois. But anyways, that will do it for Colin and I. No guests this week. We just wanted to talk to each other because that's just the way we do things around Illinois week. But anyways, we will talk to you again next week leading up to the Michigan State game, get into some real football. But the game is at noon in Champaign, Illinois on ABC. Until then, for Colin Hassel, I'm Dan Herbner. This has been the show from the Shoe.